Hi there, this is Heather Vickery, and you've tuned in to the Brave Files podcast. I'm so glad you're here with us this week because we are learning all about trusting our intuition and how doing so can lead to amazing personal discoveries and major transformation. My guest joining me today is energy healer and medical intuitive Megan Caper, and she shares her story of overcoming stage 3 colon cancer as a young adult. With guidance from her intuition and holistic healing, Megan became a self-healer. She now uses her psychic skills, intuition, and past medical experiences to help others pinpoint a condition or a diagnosis. This is a great episode to listen to if you want to understand the power of your intuition and how to harness it for happiness, growth, and success, as well as physical well-being. And if you are ready to lean further into your own brave, come on over to Facebook and join us in our private Facebook collective, Brave on Purpose. This is where you're going to find an entire group of like-minded individuals who want to use their fear and leverage it into intentional bravery to live a bigger, bolder, braver, more successful life in every possible way. All you have to do is head over to Facebook and search Brave on Purpose and join us. Now here's the episode.
Challenging, invaluable, and transformative.
This is Heather Vickery, and you're listening to The Brave Files, stories from people living courageously. When we choose bravely in big and small ways, it powerfully elevates our lives. I hope these stories connect with you and encourage you to embrace bravery in every possible way, day after day. Together, we can build a movement of courageous living that enriches both our lives and our communities. And if you enjoy the show, I ask you to please share it with others. Maybe think of someone who you want to choose bravely right alongside you. Thanks for tuning in. Now here's the show. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Brave Files. This is your host, Heather Vickery, and I am so happy to have you here with me today. I have a question for all of you listening. Are you the kind of person that's tuned in to your intuition? Do you let your intuition guide you, or are you still trying to figure out if those voices in your head are supportive or sabotaging? For me personally, I live by my intuition. After years of working on it, I can actually feel my intuition inside my body, in different parts of my body, and it tells me to take action on it. And today's guest, Megan Caper, was absent-mindedly rubbing her hands on her belly one day while she was trying to go to sleep and heard a distinct and clear voice in her head say, "Watch this spot." Now, she's here to tell us about that and what happened after that and how it's shaped her life. This is going to be a fascinating conversation. Megan, welcome to the Brave Files.
Thank you, Heather. I appreciate being here.
I'm glad to have you here. Y'all, that was a mouthful, and normally I would redo all of that, but I think you got the gist of it. So, Megan, I would love to sort of get some background information. We've sort of teased our listeners. Tell us about that moment. And also, I'm curious, prior to that, had you been really in tune with your intuition?
That's a great question. I'll answer them in the backwards order you asked them.
Okay.
So before that, I had not been in touch with my intuition. I actually grew up in a household where all of that stuff was considered hooey, basically. There was no faith of any kind, no religion, no belief in anything metaphysical or spiritual. So I sort of had grown up not believing that any of that was true and that intuition was just our imagination or something like that. So no, I hadn't really depended or used my intuition for anything before that. It was definitely a new experience for me. So what happened was, I was, let's see, how old was I when that first started? It was in my late 20s. And as you said, I was trying to go to bed and I was just sort of rubbing my belly in sort of a self-soothing motion. And all of a sudden I got to this spot and all of that mental chatter that normally goes on in your head, like, I have to go to the market tomorrow and I can't forget to go get cat food or whatever it is, right? Went completely silent and I heard my own voice, but it was very authoritative and calm. I now know that's my intuitive voice, but at the time I didn't know that. And it just said, there's going to be something wrong here. And I really didn't know what to make of it. It freaked me out, but
I'll bet.
Yeah, I didn't know what to make of it. I thought, well, should I go to the doctor? But if I went to the doctor and told them I'm hearing voices in my head, they would refer me, but probably not to where I needed to go, right? So I didn't know what to do. So I just sort of was like, okay, well, that was odd. And just sort of monitored that spot, would put my hand over there every now and again, and nothing. Finally, 5 years later, I'm doing the same thing. I have my hand over that spot. I was having no other symptoms, nothing. And I heard same thing happen. Mental chatter went 100% silent. My own voice saying, there's something wrong there now.
Wow.
And that obviously freaked me out a little bit more, but I still didn't know what to do. I still didn't know, like, what do I do with this information? And as I said, I had no experience or access or familiarity with anything alternative. So I didn't have any resources really. So about 6 months later, I started getting really bad stomach pains. And so then I did go to the doctor, and they thought I had irritable bowel, or they thought I had a whole bunch of other stuff. They put me on some different medications. Nothing seemed to be working. So finally, my doctor was like, well, let's just put you under and do a test and see what happens. And so they did, and they woke me up and they said, you have stage 3 cancer.
Wow.
And I was 32 at the time. And needless to say, that was quite a shock. And they immediately scheduled me for surgery. It was colon cancer. It was stage 3 colon cancer.
Holy cow.
They immediately scheduled me for surgery 3 weeks later, and then chemo starting a month after that. And when I went into the surgery, I asked the surgeon afterwards, I said, based on what you found, looking at the tumor, the size or whatnot, can you tell me about how long it had been there? And he said, oh, I would estimate about 5 years.
Yeah. What?
And
Okay.
that moment was what started me going, okay, like, what is going on here? Yeah. My background is in science. I was pre-med. I looked at it from sort of a scientific point of view. Okay, this can't be coincidence. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's got to be something going on here. And then I was just, as someone who studies the body and the mind, I was fascinated by how did my body, A, know that cancer was just starting, B, transform that into a voice in my head, like a thought in my head. Like, what was that process, right?
Yes.
So I started taking a whole bunch of classes on intuition, classes on energy healing, which obviously energy healing has a different philosophy of body, mind than traditional Western medicine. Mm-hmm. And, just really trying to learn about how the body really works, which does encompass everything Western medicine knows and all that research, but also adds this whole other mind, body, spirituality component too, which, really gives a whole picture of how things work.
Yes.
So that's sort of what started my journey. And that was, 13 years ago now. So I've been on this train ever since. I'm not getting off.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. It just makes so much more sense to me than everything I learned in pre-med. Everything I learned in pre-med always seemed to be missing pieces. I was like, but what about, how does that work? Or why does this come up? Or how does this, you know what I mean? So yeah, anyway, so that's my
I love
story.
it. I think, well, there's so much I want to ask you, but we have had a number of people on this show. The first person that comes to mind is Dr. Sandra Dalton Smith, who, much like you, I mean, she didn't intuitively know that she had cancer, but she had a complete sort of burnout breakdown. And she said, if I could think myself into this, I can think myself out of it, and has started, like you, looking at other ways to treat illness and health and preventative maintenance and all of that. So I love whenever I hear a trained medical professional saying, wait a minute, we haven't been looking at the whole picture this whole time. I just think there's so much value in that. And as, I am not a medical professional, as just a person who needs to be cared for, I really look for that in the doctors and the nurses, the holistic healing people that I work with. So I value that. Okay, so terrifying to discover at this very young age that you had, I'm sorry, hold on. Excuse me. Thank you. Can you hear that?
I can, yeah.
Shit. All right, they can't vacuum for very long. Let's just wait a second. I'm sorry. getting that kind of diagnosis at such a young age has to be, oh my God.
Now this is turning into a Monty Python sketch.
Andrew, we should do some sort of bloopers and outtake or something. I don't know. Let's see. What can we... Tell me how you know Lynn. Let's talk about that for a second.
I know Lynn because we both took classes in this one energy healing modality called Body Talk, which was the first one I ever took. I love Body Talk. I don't know. I mean, you must be familiar with it.
I want to know more. I want to do it. I don't know.
It is again, that was the one where it takes, the guy who started it is one of those brilliant, you know, he's an acupuncturist and a chiropractor and a this and a that. He's brilliant. And it was a good gateway drug for me because he takes all of the Western anatomy and physiology and just blows it open by adding things like belief systems and, environmental factors and all this other stuff that we all know affects our health, but isn't sort of used or built into the Western medical system in terms, psychiatrists deal with belief systems, but very rarely do Western doctors go like, well, you're having heart problems, tell me about your stress, right? Yeah. Or tell me about your childhood, or even though there's so many studies that show,
oh my gosh. Yeah.
That, I don't know if you know about the ACE study, the Adverse Childhood Experience study, came out of, I think, UC San Diego. But yeah, that talks about how if you score high on this test of adverse childhood experiences, your rates of illness for not just things you think about like depression and addiction or something like that, but things like cancer, diabetes, things like that skyrocket.
I believe all of that.
And so it just has to do with, how are you holding these emotions in your body? How are you approaching the world? Are you constantly in a state of fear or lack or shame or anger? That affects our physiology. Of course it does, right?
It does. Yeah, it absolutely does. I mean, I'm certified in positive psychology, and I've written 2 books on gratitude and have gratitude journals. And even, that's shown to support those things as well.
Completely. And then when I went, so I was pre-med, but I ended up getting even before my diagnosis and all of that, I got very disenchanted by what it is to actually be a doctor.
Yeah.
Both the people themselves and sort of how they're trained, and also the insurance. So I ended up going back and getting my master's in occupational therapy, which was a much better fit for me. So still in the healthcare field, but one of the things I loved about it is it incorporated all of these quality of life factors in your healing and your health. And it was client directed. Mm-hmm. So you weren't just like, oh, you're having these symptoms, here's what we give for these symptoms. It was, what's meaningful to you in life? Okay, now how do we create a healing plan for you that incorporates your beliefs and values and what's important to you, which of course is going to help your healing, right?
Absolutely.
If I'm having to do rehab exercises just because someone tells me to do 30 reps of leg lifts, I'm much less likely to do it than if I were like, what's really important to me is to walk my dog. And I'm like, okay, well then let's walk your dog. Let's get you to the point where you can walk your dog every day.
Yeah.
So much more motivating, right? So it's,
I love that. I would be curious to know if or how you used that as you were personally going through treatment for cancer.
Oh yeah, for sure. I ended up going to grad school right after that diagnosis, but the side effects of chemo last for a really long time. I still have some. And yes, definitely I joke that, I was my own first patient when I was in grad school, especially the cognitive stuff, because chemo wiped out my memory to a large degree. Oh, yeah.
Now, that's something I haven't heard. I've heard a lot of things, but I hadn't heard that there's memory loss from it.
So there's 2. It depends on which chemo you're on. A lot of them have, they call it chemo brain.
Okay. Like pregnancy brain?
Yeah, exactly. It's so part of it is spaciness, but it can knock out certain parts of your brain, the different types of chemo. So the one that I had particularly that knocks out your short-term memory and your auditory processing. So I definitely sort of worked to rehab myself in those areas and sort of came up with different compensatory techniques and things like that so that I could function.
Can you share some of those?
Yeah, so definitely executive function was a huge part of it. So executive function is that thing we all do, but we don't realize we're doing it, like keeping a calendar or a to-do list, or the way we organize our house so that in the morning we like know where the coffee is, and then we know where, whatever, right? These things are all already planned out, so we don't have to think about them. And so I just used a lot of, well, first I just used a lot of writing things down. Everything went in my calendar. Like even things that you would think you would remember, I wasn't. And so they all went in my calendar. So this was an interesting one because it included an emotional shift for me, but relying on other people for help.
Yeah.
So I was in grad school, so that meant asking classmates for their notes. Can I look at your notes and Xerox them? Even though I was taking my own notes, I had always, one of my big ego definitions of myself was smart person, right? I was always a very good academically
It's hard to
minded,
ask for help when you're the smart person.
And so that was humbling, is to be like, I can't trust my own notes, and it's so helpful for me to look at someone else's too, because I would forget what happened in class an hour earlier. If I didn't write it down as it was happening, it would just be gone. And then having to ask professors things like, can I record this class? Things like that. So I would record things, audio record things, so that I could listen back to them later in case I'd lost something, because my processing had also slowed down a lot. A lot of this is back. I mean, I would say I'm back to 95% of what I was. But that was very humbling and very challenging. And it helped me both as an occupational therapist and now what I do as an energy healer and medical intuitive, because I know what it's like physically and emotionally to have a new normal, and how much grief that takes.
Oh my
you
gosh.
have to let go of your idea of yourself and how it's been your whole life in some ways.
There's so much in that, and there are so many ways where that applies. For me, I experienced all of that when I came out at 38 and left a decade-long marriage. And I still had to learn to ask for help. I still had to learn to redefine my life and challenge the status quo and ask questions. It wasn't the same as it would be for you or for somebody who was literally trying to save their own life. But we use those skills so often and in so many different ways. And it's such a valuable lesson to learn that none of them define you and that it can all be changed.
Yeah. And just to realize that, it makes sense why our brains want to hold on to so strongly to these, ego definitions of ourself, right? Like I am female and I am healthy and I am smart and like all of these things that it's very important. When someone asks me, tell me about yourself, we have a list of things we say, usually something to do with our job, where we live, our family, things like that, right? But it's also important, and this is something I've learned through just studying, different traditions, Buddhism and meditation and other like all traditions really say this, that, things are going to change. Your whole lifespan, everything's going to change. And you have maybe some idea of maybe where it's going, but you really don't know. All of a sudden you wake up and you're diagnosed with stage 3 cancer and they're like, oh, yeah, you have a 50-50 chance of living 5 years. You may not see 40, right?
Wow.
And it's, so really for me, a core thing that has led to just having way more life satisfaction and way less anxiety and depression and all of those things that can sort of haunt us is to just, it's that present moment thing. It's like, okay, well, this is what my life is right now. And if it changes, I'm going to have grief, even good changes. Even if you, won the lottery and all of a sudden, decided you wanted to buy a Caribbean island and live there or something, right? Or whatever your dream is, you still have to grieve letting go of who you were before.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we don't give that process enough space and time to breathe.
That literally gave me chills. It did. That sounds so dramatic, but I really think it's true. And I also feel like there's such a gift in redefining what the word grief means. It's got such a negative connotation, but grief is a healthy human emotion.
Yeah.
And when we can change what we identify that word as, then we can change how it makes us feel and embrace using it to grow instead of as a crutch or letting us feel bad,
Yes.
right? We
yes.
have a choice on what we want that word to mean to us.
Yes. And I was reading somewhere, I don't remember, it was some philosophy book, I believe, or some teacher, I don't remember who, was talking about how we really, really are adverse to being in that middle place of not being, in place A where everything's defined and we know who we are. And then we're moving towards something new, but we don't exactly know what that is yet, right? Yeah. And then we're uncomfortable in that middle place. But they pointed out that middle place is beautiful because it's full of potential. You're not constrained by these ego definitions of, I'm a mother or I'm, whatever, right? So if we can sort of really just be like, okay, I'm in this unsure place. And grief is one of those places because we're letting go of something old, or we're forced, sometimes it's by choice and sometimes we're forced to let go, right? And then we're in this middle ground. But the middle ground is the beautiful place where you really get to stop and reflect and be like, okay, what's important to me? How do I want this process to go? And is all of this old stuff still serving me? Because here's a chance to let it go if I don't need it anymore,
Yes, so many amazing things. I do workshops quarterly where I help people look at what's actually happening in their lives and say, what happened? Do I want it to happen again? Does it serve me? I'm a big fan of boundaries. I think they're the key to a happy life across the board.
Yes.
Identifying what they should be, setting them, communicating them, sticking to them. But I don't want you to get so caught up on a boundary that when it stops serving you, you still use it. So
right.
I love that you said that. You have to decide when something just doesn't fit for you anymore and let it go. And sometimes that is really difficult to do.
And I use that in my work in a slightly different way all the time, which is that I'm helping people through energy healing release these emotional patterns that usually they're from when they were younger, like childhood, but it could be from a past marriage or something. And it's something that their body did in order to protect them at the time. So, for example, maybe somebody was just didn't speak their mind. And never spoke up because when they were a kid, that was a dangerous thing to do in their household, right? That could have gotten them yelled at. That could have gotten them shunned. That could have gotten them who knows what, right? And so very, very smart, young little psyche, little body mind went, well, I'm just going to not speak up. That's much safer. And I end up being happier when I don't, right? Things end up turning out better for me when I don't speak up. That's wonderful. But now that you're an adult, we continue those patterns because we never learned another way. And our bodies, it just sort of gets integrated into the operating system in a way, right? It's sort of like a computer where it's a little bit of code. And the body is like, well, this has been working fine so far. Why should I get rid of it, right?
Right.
Not realizing, no, it's caused all these ripple effects. And for me, the part I work on is one of those ripple effects ends up being physical symptoms.
Absolutely.
So that could be like an autoimmune disease, right? Which is the body's way of silencing or attacking itself in some way, right?
Oh, wow.
So those are the kind of things I work on, but it's boundaries. It's just boundaries in a very different way. But I always, always, always reiterate to the client, this isn't a bad thing. This guaranteed your survival at a certain age and at a certain time. And it was smart of your body to do. Yeah. But we always have to look at, is this still serving me? And I feel like that is where each person's intuition can really come into play.
Yeah.
Because we know where our compass north of joy is. And if we tune in, we can really figure out which things are bringing us joy and which things are, hindering us or troublesome or anything like that. So
I'm curious, based on what you've learned and now what you're teaching and supporting clients with, do you think there's an age or a moment or a thing that happens that clicks where somebody can really tap into that intuition and know the difference and take action on it?
I don't. I think that for some people, obviously my story is pretty dramatic.
Yes.
And I then realized afterwards that I'd been intuitive my whole life. I just hadn't had the language for it or the knowledge of what that was. Because again, I grew up in this household where it was not ever acknowledged as a real thing, right? I really do believe, though, that intuition is much like learning to play a musical instrument or learning, a particular sport or something. I think everyone can do it with practice. Everyone.
Yeah.
I think some people maybe have a little more innate ability. There's some people that can pick up any instrument and within 2 weeks be playing it, right?
Not me.
There's other people that it would take 3 years of daily practice to do that, right? So I think that I think that everybody has this. I don't think it's some weird, unique thing that, only a few select people have. I just think that it takes practice, and it takes, sort of as you were talking about in the intro, like learning how to trust that voice. Is this my imagination or is this my intuition?
I don't know about all of the listeners, but it feels like a relief to hear you say that it's not only for the gifted. It's not only for the special. Like, you can do this. Do you have any resources at all, books or videos or podcasts or anything that you have really found that help tap into your intuition?
That's interesting. So yeah, I mean, I've taken some classes. Honestly, the thing that has helped me the most is meditation.
Everybody says that.
Yes. And I have a meditation that I recorded actually as part of a larger group program, but I'm happy to send it to you if you want to send it out to your listeners.
Oh, sure. Yeah, folks. You can get your hands on that.
Yeah, I call it Meet Your Spirit Guides. And this I use personally all the time. And basically what it is you go in, you get in a meditative state. So there's a million ways to get into a meditative state, but I use breathing because it's tried and true and, seems to work.
Yeah.
And then once you do that, you go in and you can have a conversation with your spirit guides. And again, the first time or 2 or 3 or maybe even 5, you may not get anything, right? Or you may get something and you're like, am I really talking to my spirit guides, or is this my imagination, right? But, again, it's practice. There's a reason it's called meditation practice. Again, much like a musical instrument, even someone who's amazing at it still needs to practice every day or they will lose that skill, right? So just like any other kind of practice, you get better over time. You start to get more intuitive over time. Like if I were learning a musical instrument, I'd get more intuitive about what I need to do to play a certain piece. I wouldn't have to think about it, right?
Yeah.
And then also it's something you need to continue practicing or you will lose the ability. You can gain it again, of course. But yeah, I would say just think of it as play. And the other big part, so that you're not this, this heavy duty thing of like, did that really happen or not, right? And then the other thing, and then also play in terms of like, play with applying this knowledge. So if you're meditating and you suddenly get an intuitive hit that, you should wear the blue sweater instead of the green one today.
Play with
it. Wear the blue sweater and then just sort of be on the lookout. Like maybe somebody's like, wow, that's a really nice sweater. And it starts a conversation that leads you somewhere you're supposed to go that day, right? Like it opens up an opportunity or something, right?
Yeah.
Just play, like look at it as play. And then the other thing that I think is really, really huge and made a huge difference for me is realizing that this is a two-way conversation. So when I get an intuitive hit, and I do this in my sessions and I do this in my personal life when I get intuitive hits, if I get an intuitive hit and I'm like, wait, what? Why am I seeing a pineapple? Like, what?
Right,
so like,
right.
why did the image of a pineapple just pop in my head or whatever it is, right? It's a conversation. I close my eyes and I tune in and I say, why did you just show me a pineapple? And the trick to intuition is you wait and listen. Right? So we're used to solving problems by going out and figuring out a solution, right? Intuition is the opposite. Intuition is quieting your mind and listening for the solution. And so it's a conversation. So I can be like, why did you show me a pineapple? And then, maybe I'll get quiet and listen and I'll hear like, you really need a vacation. You should go to Hawaii.
Oh, yeah.
Or whatever, right?
Somehow I'm seeing a pineapple right now.
Right, exactly. And so, that was another huge piece for me is realizing that it's not just this like one-way conversation where you're waiting for a download or waiting for an intuitive hit. Like you can ask, and this is part of the meditation, is you can ask your spirit guides questions. And wait for answers. And if it's not enough or you don't understand or you're like, wait, what? Why? I don't get it. I need more information. Ask. And what I've found is that they are more than willing to give you information. I personally think there's a little thing going on with them respecting free will in that they wait for us to ask for help and they wait for us to ask questions. and then they're happy to give us answers.
I love that.
Although that being said, I will say on occasion, the answer I get from them is, you know what, this is one of those life lessons you have to learn. And so we can't tell you that yet because you have to actually go through and experience it and learn whatever you're supposed to learn from it. Right.
That's a gift too.
Yeah, but that's a gift too. Exactly. But 90% of the time, I would say if I ask them a question, they give me an answer. And if I say like, I need more clarity on this, they'll give me more information.
I really love it. I want you to write a book on this, please.
Okay.
I really do. Because I am one of those people. I am super woo-woo, but I took the woo in most cases. I have a very analytic brain, and I wanted to understand what, if any, science was behind it. That's what pushed me into positive psychology. That's, all of the systems and strategies and boundaries and the things that I speak about, leveraging your fear into intentional bravery. There's science behind all of that if you look for it, that shows that it's not made up. It's not woo-woo, although we feel like it is. These things actually work, but I suck at meditation. And I've tried so many times. And my partner's TM certified, Transcendental Meditation certified. Yeah. And she meditates twice a day. She can meditate anywhere, in the middle of an airport, in the middle of a choir concert. Like she can just close her eyes and go into a meditative state. And I can't even do it for 5 minutes on my couch. And I really want to. So I want you to write a book so that you can help people like me. But can you just speak quickly to people who are like me, that I limit voice myself right out of meditating because I'm like, fuck it, I can't do it. Like it's going to stress me out. It's going to make me feel bad. So I'm just not going to do it. So how do I get over the hump?
Yeah, so that's really interesting, and I hear that a lot, and I experienced that a lot too when I was first starting meditation. Is this frustration with yourself that you can't stick with it, right? Mm-hmm. So I would say two things. One, actually three things. One is that thoughts are going to come up. That's actually part of the process. Yeah. So one of the beautiful benefits of meditation is that you learn to see a thought come up, or a feeling, or a sensation in your body, and you go, I love naming them. That's one of my favorite ththings. I go, like if I'm meditating and all of a sudden I find myself thinking of like, oh my gosh, which clients do I have tomorrow? Like, what's my schedule tomorrow? I go, oh, planning. That's what I'm doing. I'm planning, right? Or if something comes up like, I have a dinner party on Saturday and I'm nervous because I'm making a new thing, and I don't, worry. Okay. And I actually thank my brain, because again, I believe in gratitude too. I think it's super helpful. I go, thank you, brain, for doing your job. I really, really appreciate it. However, that's not what I'm doing for these 20 minutes. You can have the rest of the 23 hours and 40 minutes of the day. Yeah. What I'm doing right now is I'm observing, right?
Yeah.
So I name it, I thank it, and then I send it on its way. And the beauty of that, there's twofold. One is it does teach you to observe your thoughts and observe your emotions, and then that starts to carry over into the time when you're not meditating. So instead of being carried away by a sudden burst of anger or frustration or anything, you could go, oh, anger. This is anger. Mm. And what that allows you to do is make a choice in how you want to respond.
I love that.
Right? Which, my coworker is really annoying. Let's say, oh, God, she's so frustrating. Oh, frustration. What do I want to do with that? And you can choose. Do I want to go talk to her? Do I want to just like laugh it off? Do I want to, right? You can choose sort of how you want to react to it. So that's one thing. The other thing is having those thoughts, especially at the beginning when you're learning meditation, come up, and all of a sudden you realize, oh, I set a timer for 20 minutes, and for 15 minutes of that, I've been thinking about my, my market list or whatever, right?
Go do something about it.
Right. It gives you a chance for self-love and self-care. Okay, I'm a beginner. I'm learning. And that's a perfectly fine place to be. We all need to cultivate beginner's mind more often, right? Like the expert has few options in their mind. The beginner has infinite, right?
Oh, I love that. So,
it's another way that we can practice not beating ourselves up, which we all need practice. I think that it's beautiful in those two ways. I would also, a fact that just helped me a lot. I mean, again, I think you and I both are similar in that we have these analytic minds, right?
Absolutely.
And so learning certain facts about things helps me sometimes. One of my meditation teachers who had lived in Tibet and had worked with the Dalai Lama. Like, he was American, but he had gotten to be like a pretty high mucky muck in he told me that they did this study to see how long it took for monks that had been meditating professionally, like this is their job, been meditating for like 20, 30 years, decades, how long before they had a thought come into their mind when they started meditating, right? And everyone in the class was like, oh, it's probably like 20 minutes, right? They can just slip into that meditative state and like all of a sudden they're not having thoughts and they're probably pros at this, right? It was something like 23 seconds before they had a thought. So it's not about not having thoughts. It's about observing those thoughts instead of letting them take over your brain and run the train, right? And taking it down some track, right? It's about the practice of getting better and better and better and better at when the thought comes up at an earlier point before it's been 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes after it's only been 5 seconds to be like, oh, hello, anxiety. I see you.
Yeah.
And then just let it go. Be like, and that, for me, I just go, that's not what I'm doing. I love you, but that's not what I'm doing right now. Thank you, brain.
I love that. I really do. So, I love it. Thank you. I'm going to try. I'm inspired. I'm inspired to go and try. What do you think is a good amount of time to start when you're first new to meditation? How much time to spend?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it depends so much on the person. I mean, if it's something that you've had a bad experience with in the past and you're trying to like get yourself, back on the horse or whatnot, so to speak, I would say just start with 5 minutes. Just start with 5 minutes.
All right. Yeah. We can do that, y'all. Maybe I will do a Brave Files meditation challenge where we'll all agree to meditate for 5 minutes every day for 30 days and you guys can check in. We'll have fun. Maybe we'll have some fun. We'll come into the Facebook group and we'll talk about if it's working and how you're feeling about it. What do you think?
And again,
will you join us in the group, Megan?
I will, for sure. And again, approach it with a sense of play. This is not serious. It shouldn't be serious. Like, this is something that is a fun way to access different parts of our body, mind, and to connect to that larger wisdom, right? It's not like, oh my God, I have to go to the gym and do 30 minutes of cardio no, it should be fun,
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. So that's a nice lead in. I am a big believer, a big fan of celebration. I believe when we stop, even if it's just briefly for a moment, and acknowledge something that's gone well or successful in our lives. And for some folks, that's like, I got out of bed and I didn't think I was going to, or I took a shower today. And for some people, it's really, big, enormous things like beating cancer or, starting a business, writing a book, whatever. How do you like to celebrate success?
It's interesting. I don't have any kind of like ritual. I don't have the urge to go like buy myself a present or something. I like to sit with the feeling of loving on myself or being proud of myself.
Yeah. Love that. It's one of my favorites as well. It's reflection.
Yeah, it's reflection. Yeah. And I think it's so easy for us to diminish our own achievements, right? And I think it's good sometimes to, not, because we're taught, we either think, oh, well, that was what I was supposed to do, or I had to do that, right? Or, I didn't have a choice, or what if it was something like going through cancer? I'm like, well, I didn't have a choice. Like, what was I going to do? Not do treatment?
Right.
So,
I mean, you did have a choice. You could have.
You could have, right? So, but to really stop and say, to reflect and just be like, wow, I'm proud of myself for that, Because on the other hand, we're told not to be self-absorbed, right?
Yeah, I'm fighting that beast every day with clients. Like, that is not self-absorbed. It's not self-absorbed to say I did this thing and I did it well and I'm proud of myself.
Yeah. And again, it all comes back to, I'm a big proponent of self-love. I think we all spend way too much time beating ourselves up. The ways that we speak to ourselves are so much worse than we would ever dare speak to anyone else in our life. They're so much harsher. And if we can change that particular voice in our head to be more kind and loving, I think it changes your life.
I totally agree. I totally agree with you on that so much. Thank you for sharing that. And some folks, they have a dance party. I'm a dance party person personally. Some say they have a glass of champagne. Some say chocolate. They go out to dinner. But I I do a number of different types of celebration, and I really value that quiet time with yourself for reflection and give yourself some props because you know what? Life is hard and business is hard and parenting is hard. And it's just better when you take the time to acknowledge your hard work and dedication and that you're growing as a human.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, it's a great time too, like, you know, to maybe at the end of every month or at the end of every year, like take stock and like, you know, what did I accomplish this month? Because I think it's easy for it to turn into a blur.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So really just taking that time to purposefully look at what did I do well?
Yes.
You know, instead of just the moments where it randomly sort of hits you or, you know, when someone else compliments you, that's always nice too. And it causes me to stop. But, you know, to really stop and be like, wow, I did a lot this month.
Absolutely. Well, that's
You know?
actually one of the question in both of I have a gratitude journal for adults and I have one for kids and families. And one of the questions in both books is what went well today and why?
Yeah.
So daily, or if you journal, you know, a couple times a week or whatever, it forces you to think about things on a really small, on a micro level. What happened today that went well? Why did that happen? How do I make that happen again?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a life coach that I listen to sometimes, and she has a practice, which I love, that she says, when everyone asks, you know, anyone says, how are you? Like anyone, like could be the, you know, sales clerk in the store or your partner or whoever, you answer with, I'm amazing.
Yeah.
And she said, the reason you do that is because they go, really? Why? Because that's such a unique response. And then you have to think of why your life is amazing. Like you have to come up with an answer.
That's so great.
And so I love that practice because, yeah, it's true. It's true, you know? We all just sometimes don't think of why our life is amazing, but it is. It is.
It totally is. Years and years and years ago, when I was a young lady in the city of Chicago, this is too much information, but I loved it. It's such a fun story. I went on a first date with somebody, and the date lasted all night. We were out all night, nothing inappropriate. And not that would be bad. And we were on the train. We still had to go to work. I had to go to my job, and we got on the train, and this strange woman that we didn't know saw us and smiled, and we smiled, and we said, how are you? And she turned around and she said, I'm better than James Brown. And for those of you who don't know, James Brown, I feel good. Yeah, right. Okay. So I loved that answer. I'm like, oh yeah, better than James Brown is amazing. James Brown's song is about feeling good. So that's what that made me think of. Totally
that's
random.
Awesome.
Totally random aside. All right. So we could talk for a very long time. Can we be real life friends? I want to be friends, Megan.
Of course we can be real life friends.
Okay.
Well, you need a vacation in sunny Southern California, right? So there you go.
I certainly do. Yes. That's going to probably come up in my meditation that I'm going to try to do later today. But we do have to wrap up the show. And so I get to ask you one of my favorite questions, something near and dear to my heart, which is, what's your favorite charitable organization to support?
My favorite charitable organization to support is called First Descents, and they are an organization that takes young adult cancer survivors on week-long trips, either kayaking, rock climbing. I think they've added ice climbing as well, and surfing. Since I went, they've added a couple other programs. But it was started by this guy named Brad Ludden, who's an Olympic kayaker, when his aunt got diagnosed with cancer when she was really young. And one of the problems with being diagnosed with cancer at 30 or 25 or even 35 is no one around you has had cancer. No one around you can relate to this experience. And when you go to support groups, everyone's 75. And so their experience of having cancer is very different because they've already lived their life. They probably have retirement and they're in a home. You're just starting out, you're just starting out in your career. You're in a very different position. You haven't had kids yet. Cancer a lot of times causes infertility, which can be heartbreaking when you're young, right?
And that it was the truth for you as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so this organization brings together young adults. I think the cap is 40 of how old you can be. So, anyone from 18 to 40, and takes them on this week-long trip. And there's two things. One, most of us have just finished chemo or radiation or surgery. You don't think there's any possible way you can get in a kayak and go down rapids. You're like, I'm just not strong enough. You get very scared, obviously, having cancer and going through medical treatment and seeing your body change and deteriorate. And One of my friends joked that I didn't know that when I finished chemo, I'd wake up in the body of an 80-year-old woman. Like, it just completely depletes you. And so you don't think you can do it. And this organization is so supportive. They help everyone get in the kayak, no matter where you're at. One of the guys on my trip had one of his leg amputated due to cancer. And so for half a day, we all searched for a rock that was the perfect weight and size to his other leg to counterbalance, so that when he was in the kayak, it was floating. Because when he just had one leg, the kayak would tilt, right?
Yeah.
So we spent the whole day looking for this rock for him so that he could get in the kayak and participate. And so it's just the most wonderful, supportive organization. They help you learn that you're not to be scared. It's actually perfect for this podcast. They help you get over that fear, that PTSD that getting cancer, especially so young, can leave you with. And you have this tribe of people that finally understand what you're talking about when you're like, I was 32 and I got cancer. And they're like, yep, me too. And it's, again, no other 32-year-olds really get it because they haven't had cancer. And you can't really relate to the 60, 70-year-olds who have, because it's just such a different life experience. So spending this week with people that can finally get it, like really, really get it on a level. I'm still such good friends with these people that I met over 10 years ago.
That's amazing.
In this group. And like, I've gone to their weddings and, like all sorts of things. So I love First Descents. Okay. I think that it is life-changing for anyone who's young and gets cancer. And it's free. It's 100% free.
I love that.
It's a pay it forward thing. So the first trip is completely free. They pay for your airfare, they pay for lodging, everything. And then if you want to go again, you have to fundraise to send someone on their first program. And then once you fundraise enough for that, you can go on your second program or your second week.
I love that for so many reasons. And I've known way too many people, including children and young adults, who have lost their battle with, or are still fighting cancer, but also just for the idea of everyone, you can do hard things. I mean, it's one of the reasons I do NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month, where I write 1,600 words every day for 30 days. It's hard. Or I've done cleanses just to prove that I can do hard things. No matter what life throws at me, I can do hard things. And obviously, First Descent is a much bigger concept, but you guys can take that concept anywhere. Do anything you want with it. You can do hard things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of their mottos that I love is challenge by choice.
Yeah.
And what they mean by that is you just went through this huge challenge that was not your choice. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that you can't re-engage in life and do hard things and do scary things. Because it's tempting to go hide in your shell after cancer, right? But that's part of this experience is like, nope, you go out and you live your life.
Love it.
And that means doing hard things.
I love it so much. So listeners, give them a little love. They'll be our charity of the week, whether you have time or resources to provide, or just share it with somebody that you know, like them on social media, whatever it is. This is how we grow stronger as a community. And this is what we're called upon to do at this phase in our life and in the world. Megan, will you share your 3 words with us one last time?
Sure. My 3 words are challenging, invaluable, and transformative.
I love those words. They might be 3 of my favorite words we've ever heard on the show, because I just, if we're not challenging ourselves, we're playing small, and that's not what we're meant for. I spoke with a man earlier today that said, if I'm not failing at least 3 times a week, I know I'm not trying hard enough. I loved that. I thought it was great. So these are beautiful words. This has been so much fun. I would like to hear more. I hope that you'll join us. We'll do a meditation challenge, and maybe you can give us some pointers along the way. So we'll get that kicked off here with this episode. And I hope you'll hang out with us.
I will, for sure. That sounds really fun.
All right. Awesome. So friends, as a general rule, take the time to tap into your intuition, listen to yourself. As Megan suggested, be playful with it, invite it in, because you know what you're doing. Your body, your mind knows what it's doing. So trust yourself a little bit more. I'd love to hear what you think of this episode or different things you'd like to hear or see on the show. You can call me at 312-646-0205 and share anything you want. I look forward to that. I would like to invite invite you, if you have not already become a supporter on Patreon, to head on over to our Patreon page and learn what we're up to and figure out how to help us grow. We cannot do it without your support. So visit patreon.com/bravefiles, find a level that works for you, and join our Brave movement right now. This has been such a great episode. I am Heather Vickery, reminding you today and every day to go out and choose bravely. This episode is brought to you by Audible. Audible content includes an unmatched selection of audiobooks. Check it out for yourself and get your 30-day free trial, including one free audiobook. Simply visit audibletrial.com/thebravefiles and voila, free audiobooks. What could be better than that? You've been listening to The Brave Files, stories from people living courageously. To learn more about the show, find our show notes, or get some great bonus content, visit thebravefilespodcast.com. And we'd love to know what you think. You can give us a call at 312-646-0205. Let us know your thoughts on the episode, the show in general, or maybe share with us how you're out choosing bravely. This episode is brought to you by Vickery & Co. Success Coaching that helps you maintain a life well lived and a business well run. Learn more at vickeryandco.com. Our music is produced by Matt Lewis. Follow him on Instagram at mattmmusic or visit his website, theunionband.com. We couldn't do any of this without our extraordinary audio engineer, Andrew Olson. Learn more about him and check out his work at findandrewolson.com. And special thanks to our associate producer, Kim Statler. I'm your host and executive producer, Heather Vickery. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week.